Welcome to the Youth Sport Podcast. My name is Rihanna Poskin, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly within youth sport. It feels great when a kid comes up to you and says, "Coach, because of you, my life changed in the best way." It would feel awful to hear that because of you, the coach, a kid doesn't want to have anything to do with it ever again. I believe that kids deserve to have fun, to learn, to grow, to compete, and to play in a great environment. Join me as I interview guests that spill the tea on youth sport in order to help you make an enormous impact with kids right now. This episode of the Youth Sport Podcast is brought to you by Lululemon. I am part of the Lululemon Collective and will receive commissions when you shop through my link. Buying something for you or your loved ones, like my favorite warm down joggers, helps me to continue to bring interesting and empowering conversations for everyone. I have to tell you, when I'm coaching, I want to make sure that I'm dressed appropriately, I'm comfortable, my clothes stand up to all kinds of random situations, and that I have pockets. You never know who's going to ask you to hold something for them or what random things you need to carry with you. The Lululemon warm down joggers take care of all of my needs. I invite you to find your go-to item by browsing through the entire Lululemon site. You won't be disappointed. Please use the link provided in the video description below to start shopping. Hello everyone. Before I begin this episode, I just want to give you all a heads up that this conversation might be a trigger for anyone suffering from mental health disorders. Paul Ranger is my guest, and he is a mental health advocate. Paul and I went into this conversation with kids in mind. We wanted to make sure that what we talk about would be appropriate for young people to hear in order to help them if they are dealing with similar issues, such as anxiety, depression, or even suicidal thoughts. If you are a coach or a parent, I encourage you to listen to this conversation ahead of time and then invite your athlete to listen to it with you. We would love for you and your athlete to have a conversation about what we talk about in order to open a dialogue, to recognize signs of struggle, in order to help if necessary. Paul talks about how he's doing now after suffering from mental health issues on a big stage in front of the world. And I believe his story is inspirational for kids growing up right now. Together, we can make a difference. We just need to know how. Welcome back to another episode of the Youth Sport Podcast. Today, I have Paul Ranger with me. Paul Ranger is a retired NHL hockey player, small business owner, and coach. He has played in over 300 games in the NHL for the Tampa Bay Lightning and Toronto Maple Leafs. During his playing time in Tampa Bay, his head coach, John Tortorella, deemed him one of the best puck movers in the game, setting a record for rookie assists by a defenseman in his first year. He also played 1 year internationally in Switzerland. He currently owns and operates Ranger Defenseman, an elite training service for junior and professional hockey players. He is also the assistant coach of the Ontario Tech University hockey team. In his spare time, he enjoys cooking with his wife, Katie Ranger, who is a Canadian national level lacrosse player and coach. Or pre-COVID, you could find him reeling in some of the world's largest fish on his boat. Paul is a mental health advocate, which is part of what we'll talk about today. Now, Paul, you and I first met when you were probably at your worst, and I had no idea. You came over to my house with my brother to help renovate my basement. And much like your fishing captain that you called up to say, "Hey, can I be your first mate?" I also was curious about why you were okay coming over to help this random person with a construction job. And this was all while you were playing with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So although you were struggling, you put on a smiley face, made conversation, and made my baby gut laugh like we had never heard him laugh before. And so with me reflecting back, I realized how easy it is for all of us to miss the signs of struggle because sometimes we don't see those signs. Now, TSN did a full segment on your mental health journey last year called The Mystery of Paul Ranger. And if anyone hasn't seen it, I highly encourage you to check it out. So I just want to ask you, how are you doing now?
Unbelievably awesome. I can't describe the difference from where I am now to where I was 7-8 years ago. 10
Yeah.
years ago. It's a complete turnaround. And in fact, it's not just like I recaptured myself. Uh, I've evolved as a human being and a man and a person. I've gotten stronger, more intelligent, more experienced. I feel like I have wisdom now, from life and from what I want in life,
Yeah.
what I want out of it. And it's been quite the journey, ups and downs, and to hell and back. But um, I have to say, if I didn't go through that phase in my life, I don't know where I would be right now at
Yeah.
36. I don't, and I'm very happy with the person that I am right now. So it's an interesting topic in my own mind to think about. Like I sometimes I step out of my own shoes and think about where I would be if I hadn't gone through that giant learning phase for myself. And that's what I call it. Like it was terrible. Absolutely, depression sucked,
Yeah.
but to be able to get out of it showed me that I do have the courage and I do have the strength within me to work past something that takes years to get out of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know that I would be the same quality of person that I am now that I would have been had I not gone through it.
And that's awesome for someone that's going through depression right now, who may be in rock bottom position, to hear those words, to find out that there is struggle, there is work to be done, but there can be learning from it and then light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And during that TSN documentary, they picked one time where I said I could no longer see that light at the end of the tunnel at one point.
Yeah, I
And
just
that
watched
was a
it again.
very scary moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very, very scary moment for me and time for me. But just know that light is always there and it's always attainable. You just need to find the right path to get there.
Yeah. I was actually reflecting back because it was very emotional. I watched it last year and then I watched it again in preparation for this conversation. And it made me think about a lot of story, and you being vulnerable like that is just incredible. And I think Brene Brown would be very proud of you, all of the work that she does to talk about vulnerability and shame, and how that can be strength. And you can use that in order to show other people the power that is within us. But I was reflecting back because when I was in university, I could count three young men that had taken their lives. So before the age of 20, that they could not see that light at the end of the tunnel. And there was a young girl as well that I played with, and she suffered from bipolar disorder. And so, four beautiful people that no longer are here. And so, for young people to listen to your story that may be going through this right now, to see that you've become this person that can look back and be like, you know what? I can embrace that time and I can use that and I can move forward is very, very amazing. So thanks for doing what you're doing.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. I appreciate that. And I'm very sorry for the loss of those people. It breaks my heart a little bit to know that anyone, especially at that young age, that tender age, it is a tender age. You're still learning and developing in your late teens and early 20s.
Yeah.
And to have that, I know what it's like to struggle through that rather than be evolving and building and learning and growing.
Yeah.
It is very difficult. It's very difficult. But if I could say to everyone and anyone who might be going through some mental health issues, is that with today's knowledge about mental health in general and mental health issues from a medicinal standpoint to a support standpoint through therapy or what have you, it's very achievable to defeat it, and at least to manage it and
Yeah.
move forward and have a great life, if not defeat it.
Amazing.
And you should never give up because it's only temporary and it's not permanent. You will get there eventually. You just need to have the right attitude, and that's the hardest part because it's like it's constantly fighting
Hmm.
against your will, against your drive, against your path that you're trying to create forward for yourself.
Hmm.
And there will be ups and downs, so like a little roller coaster, but
Yeah.
good days and bad days. But you have to. One of the biggest things that I learned was actually from my uncle Wayne. He talked about how we control our attitudes. So even if all the noise in your head that's going on, if you consciously control your attitude, of course you're going to get mad once in a while and upset at what's going on. But
Yeah.
if you can learn to control your attitude and and pick what you want to focus on and pick what you want to do as an action moving forward, and have an entire sort of a new perspective on how you can use this as something to grow from,
Hmm.
then you're going to be okay. You know,
Yeah.
that was the one thing that I struggled with the most in the early years of my depression, was just how to embrace it, how to accept it,
Hmm.
because I was this big, strong, you know, supposed to be mentally tough athlete,
Yeah.
and male who, stereotypically was supposed to just not feel that stuff,
Right.
and just drive forward and ignore it. Well, the ignoring part of it caught up to me,
Okay.
you know, and it all came crashing down at that point. Yeah, it's so funny you say this stuff, because my wife has been listening to this amazing book, and I have to get the name of the author for you.
Okay.
In one segment, in one quote, she talked about how it's not necessarily male and female traits or male and female strengths and weaknesses or whatever. We all have human traits,
Hmm.
and it's society, and it's the evolution of society alongside of human nature. I think that we've developed where, the men are supposed to be big and strong and, hold the house and her support the household and all that crap,
Yeah.
and we've evolved from that, and I think we're still evolving from that, where it's not only okay for both men and women to embrace the sort of the non-stereotypical traits that are for each sex, I guess, or each gender.
Yeah.
Like, for example, for me as a male, like, it talks about how I should embrace things such as what would have been feminine qualities,
Okay.
and or feminine traits that they talk about, and compassion and empathy and being caring and soft and gentle. And it's like, no, we're supposed to be big tough hockey players,
Right.
and I think there's room for, I know that there's room for both of that, because I am a big teddy bear. Like, I mean, as much as I can be tough on the ice and tough on players and whatever, like, I have this soft, silly side within me that's great for my family and, eventually my kids and stuff like that. And I think it's something that is not only just okay to embrace, but I think it's beneficial to embrace.
Yeah. Well, I know that you have that side because, like I said, you made my kid laugh like no other. And it was just from being kind and having fun. And there was that side of you for sure that we saw it. And something that you said was really important, the acceptance. And I also was wondering if the word embrace, when it comes to mental health, if that has ever been part of what you've learned. So you said it is constantly fighting against you. So can we look at it in a way, I've heard that this is helpful, where someone says to accept it and to embrace it and not to push it away. How have you dealt with that?
I tried for a long time to push it away, mostly because of the shame or embarrassment I felt around the stereotype of feeling this way,
Okay.
but also the fact that I was playing in the NHL at that point, and there was no room for that.
Okay.
There
Yeah.
was no room for that. But at one, I don't know. I just, at one point, I absolutely, I snapped in a dressing room
Hmm.
at the Tampa Bay rink, and I, I, I couldn't handle it anymore. I literally reached a breaking point,
Yeah.
and I realized I went to go get something to eat after the game with my best friend, my childhood friend, Jamie, and I just talked to him. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I think I need to take a break. I
Yeah.
think I need to leave. I need to fix this, because it's no longer a journey that I can go on while carrying this.
Right.
I'm gonna, I'm, I don't know. I just can't go on. I think at that point, I embraced the idea that I needed to heal myself. I needed to figure out what was going on, and B, I needed to figure out how to fix it,
Hmm.
and C, yeah, how to heal from it. And then part D, I guess, came in later years after the quick fix stuff didn't work,
Yeah.
um, and it was how to grow from it,
Okay.
how to evolve, how to. I don't know. I think the word embracing it is difficult for some people because I guess there's a couple different meanings, but when you say embrace something, it's like you're fully letting it come in and letting it take over. No, that's
Yeah.
not what we're talking about. I'm
Okay.
talking about embracing the idea that, hey, I'm dealing with this,
Okay.
accepting it, almost more of an acceptance type of embracing.
Yeah.
I think you need to accept that you're dealing with it and take ownership of it, and then challenge yourself to take the necessary steps to change whatever you need to change to be healthy again.
Okay. Now, if a kid is listening to this or if a coach is listening to this, do you think
Mhm.
that they have to take a step away from everything in order to do this work?
Not necessarily. I did because it got it. I let it get that bad. I
Okay.
think the best thing that you can do, in looking back at my own journey, and others, is to be proactive. So if something is, I don't know, an issue or something is bothering you for, I don't know, I don't know what exactly what the timeline is, but let's say a few weeks or a month or a couple months. Don't wait for another year and bury it.
Right.
Deal with it, and learn to deal with it so that it doesn't manifest into something greater.
Right.
And if it does, at least you've challenged it and you can still deal with it, and you'll have a head start on how to, an understanding of how to deal with it. You know.
Right. I think, okay.
So
So,
I think it's best to be proactive about it. Is what I would say. Like be very aware of issues and how you're feeling on a long term basis and regular basis. Yeah, just try to be aware of signs and symptoms of anything of a negative or anxious or depressing type of nature. And it's really hard. It's really hard to do that. I think that's part of the reason why I've become a mental health advocate, is because to help people understand and be aware of signs and symptoms. But they're not easy because a lot of the time they're invisible. Those thoughts are invisible. You don't see them like a cast on a broken arm.
right.
They're just someone. It's really funny, Rihanna. Like when I walk around a hockey arena, or I walk around and hang out with my friends, I can tell almost within 5 minutes if someone is struggling. I would say,
Really?
yeah, it's just something, the way they say. It's not just the words that they say, but it's the way they carry themselves, and it's the way that it's the tone that they say certain sentences or words in.
Wow.
And sometimes it's a little bit of like, I don't know, facial expressions. I can just it's very it's a little bit disturbing that I can pick that up, but it's because I've been through it. I
Right.
get it.
Yeah. And so,
So
what do
those
you,
invisible signs aren't exactly invisible yet.
okay. So, for you to be walking around like that, do you feel like you need to help people that are in that situation? How do you manage that? Because maybe that person doesn't even realize that they're struggling.
I guess it depends for me on like I mean it's unfortunate, but it's also at this stage of where we are as a society, I think it's unacceptable for me to go up to a stranger and just say, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help? Do you want this?" Because I think a lot of the time they'll be a little bit shocked or embarrassed and try to stand up and say, "No, what are you talking about? I'm fine." You
Yeah,
know.
for sure.
But I think in some cases, if there's a relationship of some kind, whether you're a friend or family member or whatever, a coach to a player or a
Yeah.
player to a coach, it's okay to ask if someone's okay.
Yeah.
You know? And it might take 5 or 10 times to do that until they finally say, "I'm not okay."
Yeah.
You know.
I can
So.
absolutely relate to that because when I work with young people, part of the questions that I ask them are some basic things like, how are you eating? How's your energy? How are you sleeping? And when I do ask them, how are they doing emotionally? Most all of them will just say, good, very
Yeah.
short, but
Yeah.
if you build that relationship, you're right. You're absolutely right. If you keep on asking, I have broken through at some point where all of a sudden someone will come along to the side and just be like, hey, this is actually going on. And it may not be a big deal. It just might be, like I'm really stressed out because, well, right now with COVID, we've got athletes that aren't competing. We've got athletes that have crazy high school schedules because they're learning so much in such a short amount of time. And that's a big
Mhm.
deal for students. So they're dealing with stuff, and just having someone checking in on them is pretty amazing. So I think that's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's more and more important, not just for mental health development or awareness or whatever, but just as a human, I think it's so important that kids learn And it's on us as adults and parents that we develop relationships with our kids, and even as coaches, like to our players, that again, it kind of brings me back to this new book that I keep hearing about from my wife. But um, yeah, it's about developing a relationship that your kids will never be embarrassed to be open with you.
Right.
And I think that's not common yet. I mean, it is, but it isn't with the deepest, darkest, worries or issues or secrets. I don't think that that's that common yet. I think it's in a lot of people. I think there's many people out there now that do it,
Mhm.
but I don't think that the majority of parents were raised that way, so they don't even think twice about it. They just raise their kids the way they were raised, you
Yeah.
know? And I think it's on us. It's obviously other people's choice, but like for me, I think it's on me to try to evolve and be the best parent that I could possibly be, and that means taking what I learned from my parents, but
Mhm.
also evolving that as best I can.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
for me, a lot of that is about. I mean, at least in my story, it's about trying to be develop a relationship with your kid that it's okay to talk about things,
Yeah.
and I want them to be comfortable to talk about things, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. You
Yeah.
got to celebrate the good, you got to deal with the bad, and you got to really deal with the ugly.
Yeah. There was
And
a
it's okay to do that. And even if there is a little bit of an embarrassment there on the kids' behalf or whatever, based on for whatever reason,
yeah,
um, I want my kids to be able to have the courage and the strength to overcome that and talk about it. You
absolutely.
know.
I was working with a group of boys, and this was a time where Mike Babcock and a few of the other coaches were getting called out on bad behavior. And when I was working with these guys, I sat down one day and was just like, you don't have to put up with someone treating you bad. And you do have the power to be able to, I forget how I said it, something like, make sure that you're talking to someone that's a trusted person, because there is this fear that if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person, there will be consequences against you.
Yeah.
And we just had a little tiny conversation about it. And you could tell that the boys were really uncomfortable. But I heard whispers after the fact saying, no one's ever said that to us before. Like, no one's ever said that we have a voice almost. And that
Mm.
made me really, really sad. And so let's segue that into hazing, because that's in the news right now. And I would like to just read the definition of hazing so that kids know. I hope kids are listening to this, because I want them to know what hazing is. They may not even know the definition of it. So it's any action taken or any situation created intentionally that causes embarrassment, harassment, or ridicule and risks emotional and or physical harm to members of a group or team, whether new or not, regardless of the person's willingness to participate. So, have you ever been hazed?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to know the details. I would just like to know, obviously, your advice. So, if this is part of hockey culture, and I believe it's changing, but like I said, there is varying elements to the definition of hazing, right? Like, it doesn't have to be so bad that the kids obviously are aware of that this is not okay. It could just be emotional harassment, something like that. So, if a kid doesn't feel comfortable and if a kid is scared to say anything, what would your advice be?
That's a good question. I would say it's tough because let's put it in perspective here. So if it's in a sports team,
Yeah.
um, I think I don't think it's proper to go to a coach, because then your peers will look at you like a tattletale
Yeah.
and they probably won't accept you.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very difficult situation, because when you're a rookie or a young person on a sports team, and the older players or the veteran players are kind of putting that pressure on you to whatever, to do something silly or potentially emotionally harmful or physically harmful or whatever, to be accepted into the team.
Yeah.
I think that culture overall needs to change. But what is my advice to that young person? I think the best way and the only way this culture will change and that individual situation to get respect from the veteran players, but also not hurt yourself, but actually maybe grow stronger from it,
Hmm.
would simply be to say to those veteran players, I would say, look, I want to be part of this team. I love being part of this team and I'm all for it, but I'm not doing something that might hurt me.
Hmm.
I'm not going to partake in a situation that is wrong and not acceptable. You know, if you have to go get 6 cups of Gatorade for a captain or for a veteran or whatever, that's not embarrassing. I think that's something kind of silly. But
Yep.
if it's more in that extreme hazing type of thing, I think that it's unacceptable. And I think that if you can find the courage or at least even fake it,
Hmm.
then just say, look, this is unacceptable. I'm not doing this. I'm not partaking in this.
Yep.
I want to be part of this team, but I don't know. It's a very interesting way to put it.
It's hard. It's really
I
hard.
lo-
I can give you
yeah.
an example while you think. My brother John,
Hmm.
he left hockey. So his solution was to just leave. So he didn't have the ability to put up with it because it was so bad. The culture was something that just did not fit his personality. And he said, I don't want
Right.
to be a part of this. And so that sucks, right? Because he really did love the sport. And so I don't want kids to get into that situation where it's like, well, I'm not going to change hockey, so I'm just going to leave, right?
Yeah, and I think again, it's in the broader picture. I think that culture needs to change, and it is. It's starting to.
Yeah.
It's already started to, and I think it's well on its way to be better. But I also think I don't know. I keep coming back to the words of this is unacceptable. I'm not partaking in this.
Yeah. And it
You
can be
know,
very simple. I think
and
those are
it's
very simple things to say.
yeah. I don't think that it's. You're right. I don't think it has to be complicated. I think you just stay. I think you stick to that and you stay with it. And if the kids don't accept you, then honestly, kind of screw them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
forget it. Like they're not worth it. If they're going to stick to that old culture and they're going to try to harm you to for whatever their personal reason is because they were harmed, like it's not. I think they're not worth it at that point as people to be part of your life.
Yeah.
You know,
And now as
so
a coach, so I think right from the get-go, you can almost set the tone as a coach and just say, you know what, if I find out about this stuff, there's
yeah,
consequences, right? So there's also
for
the culture
sure.
that's created right from the beginning.
Yeah, I think coaches have yeah, it's kind of a 50-50 deal where I think the players have to take ownership of not allowing that to happen on their team and the true leaders of a team will stand up to other players who want to do it,
Hmm.
who want to haze other rookies or whatever and just say we're not doing this.
Yeah.
You know, it's not yeah, it's just not worth it. And I think it's on the coach too to set the tone
Yep.
and to set the atmosphere and saying this is unacceptable. There is no place for this in our team or our sport.
Yep.
And you know, at least set the guidelines or boundaries. Maybe there's a better way to do something of a not a hazing, but like an initiation ritual or whatever. Something silly like you gotta hit the crossbar with the puck once before you can leave the first practice or something. You know, like something silly, something
Yeah.
not harmful or emotionally draining or anything like that. But you know, and let that be it. Or you
Yeah.
simply just say, "Hey, welcome to the team, bud. Where we got your back."
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. It's really not. I
Yeah.
don't know why that that whole hazing thing, whether it's a university team or a hockey team or a soccer team or whatever,
Even frats and
really,
sorority.
yeah, absolutely. I just don't understand why it has to happen. I don't
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. There was a
Like
kid I went
it's
to.
almost like it's almost like it's for the entertainment of the older kids, you know, but it's at the risk of harming the younger person.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
It
went to
doesn't make
school with a
sense.
kid who was in a fraternity and he was branded with their Delta sign. And so that's on his body now forever. And it got really infected. He almost lost his leg because it did not heal very
Mm,
well. It's just like stupid things, right? Like he was drunk at a party and they said, this is what we do to initiate you guys into the fraternity. And he just went along with it. So this is the kind of stuff that I would like to have, is just a conversation to give kids a heads up and be like, if you're ever in this situation, here's some tools to use.
Yeah, and I love that. I think I think it's pretty simple that you're right. I think it's simple that kids simply stand up for yourself if you can find the courage, and if you can't find the courage, then fake it
Yeah.
and just say, I'm not doing this. I'm
Yeah.
not part of this. I don't want to be part of this culture.
Yeah.
And if
Okay.
they don't accept you, then they don't accept you.
Yeah.
Then that's, it's not worth being hurt to, I think it takes a bigger, stronger, better person
Mhm.
to stand up against negativity, which is clearly what hazing is,
Yeah.
rather than just going along with it and allowing that culture to continue.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the parents, because there are parents that are accepting this kind of behavior. They know what's going on, but they're not going to say anything because they're scared to rock the boat. So now, if you could talk to parents and just kind of let them know there's this idea that your kid needs to make it, right? And do everything that they possibly could in order to make it. So, what would you say to parents that are putting up with behavior that they know is not acceptable?
It's a good question. That's a different perspective. I think I think the parents need to look deep and say, what's more important for my kid? Is it the health and well-being of their full life, or is it to make one sports team and be
Right.
accepted on that sports team? And that initiation of crap and hazing or whatever
Hmm.
is not healthy, and it's not worth, it's not more valuable excuse me, it's not more valuable than the health and well-being of someone's life.
Yeah.
So what's more important to you, your kid making a not making partaking in something just to be accepted but also be scarred,
Hmm.
whether that's emotional or physical or whatever, or is it worth it for them to be healthy and probably still make it anyway?
Yeah. Hmm.
I don't get it now that I haven't looked at it as a parent perspective because I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
But when I put myself in someone's shoes, some people care, some people are kind of on the fence. Should I say something to rock the boat or whatever? And it usually takes one or two people to rock the boat, and they suffer from it.
Yeah.
And then eventually, once more people, it's like, oh, okay, well, we got to handle this wave now. Maybe we do have to change. I think it's worth, for the greater good, but also the betterment of your own life, in almost in of your kid's life, to resist, to just act above it.
Hmm.
And rocking the boat is not necessarily a bad thing. That's how things change. That's
Yeah.
how things evolve.
Yeah.
Someone says whether it's yes, no, or whatever, and they change something because they don't agree with it.
Yeah.
And whether that's hazing or whether that's a political stance or whatever it is,
Yeah.
that's how things change, is when people start rocking the boat. And if
Yeah.
you don't believe that something should happen, but you don't want to be the one to stand up, at least go behind somebody who will, you
And
know?
I think that's a huge point. Thanks for bringing that up, because sometimes if you are the one that's sticking your neck out, it can be lonely. And so having those people that are going to go in behind you and support you is huge.
Oh yeah, and there were I can remember times in when I played hockey professionally where there were things that I didn't agree with,
Hmm.
and sometimes I kept my mouth shut and sometimes I didn't.
Yeah.
And thinking about rocking the boat on a big, big time hockey team or organization or whatever, causing disruption in the normal flow of things
Yeah.
because I didn't think it was right.
Yeah.
Well, guess how long you last there. But I felt like, to be honest, in the stereotypical negative hockey culture that exists out there, and it does. I have no shame in saying that. I know it exists, but and sort of rocking the boat a little bit. I was kind of one of those pioneers, one of those first people that did it occasionally. I think it made people think behind the scenes, but I don't think it made that big of an impact yet because there weren't enough people doing it, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're hearing a lot in the conversation to support our people of color, where
Mhm.
you've got different situations that come up. And if somebody, so I'm white, and if I hear someone start a conversation where they're saying, they all of a sudden start whispering because they know that they're going to say something that may offend somebody, but they feel like it's okay to say to me because I'm white. If I say I'm sorry, that's not okay. Then already just saying that, the next time that person thinks to come over and tell me a story that might be racist, they don't. And so that's all that it takes, is just simply
Hmm.
saying, I'm sorry, that's not okay with me. And obviously, we can be more anti racist. So that's the conversation that is for another episode. But I think even in this culture, what we're talking about here is just very simply, like, I am not okay with this. And it can be that simple. So then maybe the next time that
Those are powerful words. I like that. Those are powerful. Yeah.
yeah. And so, yeah, this is why we're having conversation now, longer conversations, to try and make sure that we learn and grow. Exactly what you're saying. You had to learn and grow and get the tools in order to become the person that you are now, to overcome the struggle.
Hmm.
So let's segue into, okay, so one of the comments that I saw on the TSN, there were so many good comments. And actually, I think you may have missed it, but one of the little girls that was in the audience that asked you the question, and she said something like, how or who helped you overcome your depression? And you said, my wife.
Hmm.
And she commented on the TSN YouTube page, and she said, I was the one that asked that question. And
Oh,
I,
no way.
yeah, and I struggle with depression. And so she was obviously very impacted by you that day. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that. And, it's these little things that you don't know, like your words, somebody may not say anything. This little girl happened to say that you made an impact, but other people might just be rolling along and just be like, whoa, like that's helpful, but you may not know. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know. But so many good comments. There was one comment that I was like, are you kidding me? So this one man, he was like, what does he have to be sad about? He's making six figures. And I was just kind of like, okay, so maybe that's something that Paul can talk about. Justin Bieber is even talking about it, where it's like, money isn't going to bring you happiness. Money isn't going to solve everything. So maybe you can just talk about that real quick. Not to give
Ooh,
this hater
real
any
quick. This is
any
gonna
light of
take an
day.
hour.
What's
I
that?
was gonna say this is not gonna be real quick. This is gonna take an hour.
Okay. So
Um, no, I'll make it as short as I can. Okay, where do I start? Um, I think that a lot of people who haven't had the experience of making a lot of money have a certain perspective of what money means.
Mhm.
I think there are some people, not all people who have made a lot of money, but some people, I don't know what the percentage would be. I just know that there's some people out there that understand that money brings a sense of financial security for sure, but it also can bring you temporary happiness. And why that happens is because it's not long-term happiness. And why that happens, at least in my view and my history and my journey, everything involved with my life so far, is that yes, it has brought some financial security to my life. 100%. Can't deny that. It's very it's relieving almost.
Mhm.
But as far as making you happy or content, I remember buying my very first water vehicle, which was a Sea-Doo.
Okay.
Okay, when I was like 25, I bought a Sea-Doo. I love the water. I love fishing, as you know. If you've seen that TSN thing, then you obviously know that I love fishing.
Yeah.
I ended up buying a boat later on, like 10 years later, but I bought the Sea-Doo, and I was going through depression at that time, and I thought it could bring me some happiness.
Okay.
And it brought me temporary happiness because it distracted me from what was really going on. I started to not care about that Sea-Doo anymore because it wasn't as nice as a boat.
Okay.
Okay. So when I got the boat, I got rid of the Sea-Doo. I sold it. And now that I have the boat, my standard of fishing comfort, I would say,
Yeah.
has risen tremendously because you're able to move around and walk around and all this stuff. But I'll tell you why this matters. At your brother's wedding in Jamaica,
Yeah.
I went fishing on this tiny little wooden boat with a little 10 horsepower motor on the back of it. And we were 3 miles offshore. And I was scared as hell because I didn't know if there were sharks in the water or what was going on. But we were fishing, and we weren't even using fishing rods. We were using hand lines with little wheels. Okay. And we were catching these little bonita tuna. And I was having an absolute blast. Okay. And I think ultimately what I've had better time doing that. I remember that for some reason so vividly, and I was having an absolute blast with 3 guys that I was with. And why that matters to me is because it's your attitude and your perspective towards things. Like once you have the necessities or the necessary things in life that make you live and be comfortable, happiness is what matters. The feelings that you're and the thoughts that you produce for your own body and your mind are what truly matters when it comes to happiness. And what makes that happy is not necessarily, it's your attitude and your perspective towards life and material things in the material world, and obviously connections to other people and relationships. But when we're talking about material stuff with money, it's that stuff, that attitude towards that material world that makes you happy and produces these, dopamine and serotonin and all this good stuff for your body, versus having a crappy attitude towards having a, $10 million yacht. That wouldn't do it for me. I mean, temporarily it'd be like, holy cow, I got this giant yacht, but eventually all of a sudden now my boat that I have now that I love and adore becomes kind of off to the side. It doesn't matter anymore. So then I always think about it like, what if you lost everything? What if you lost all your money?
Yeah.
Could you still be happy with that little wooden boat fishing on a hand line with bonita tuna that I had a blast on?
Right.
Would you still be happy with that or not?
Right.
Because it depends on your perspective and your attitude with how you handle your money and how you value money or material things that matter.
You said something that was key in that explanation, was that the Sea-Doo was a distraction. And so if a kid is listening, don't get distracted and not deal with what's going on. I think that going right
Right.
back to what you had said at the beginning was taking those preventative steps so that it doesn't get out of control.
Yeah, that's as far as mental health goes, you mean? Yeah, absolutely. I think a better example of having the right attitude and perspective and where that comes from towards money and material items. I'll share with you something that I spent a lot of money on. I went on a bucket list fishing trip once upon a time with my uncle Wayne, who I love and adore and spent a lot of time fishing with as a kid, in Costa Rica. And I was still very depressed at this point, but I thought it might pick me up and get me out of it.
Okay.
And so I decided to splurge and do it. And so we went fishing, and there were bits and pieces, seconds at a time, that were great for me at the time, but I wasn't really appreciating it because I was depressed. And when I think about that guy's comment in the YouTube section, what does he have to be worried about? He's making 6 or 7 figures or whatever. And I'm just like, you're right. Why? What do I have to be depressed about? I don't know. I have certain things that are bothering me, some issues in my head that are bothering me, and I just feel bad all the time. So fast forward to this Costa Rica trip that I went on. We're staying on this beautiful resort. We had a fishing boat every day with a captain and all this stuff, and I'm living this luxurious life. And then we decided to, on our day off from fishing, we decided to walk into the local village, where it was essentially shacks and warehouses where people were living. And they had like little fruit stands, and it was called Porto Jimenez. And we walked around, and it dawned on me. I had this sort of mental awareness pause in this walkabout that we were doing. We got a little fruit smoothie that some guy was making on the side of the street. And I looked around, and there were kids playing soccer, and there were people talking in the doorways of their little shacks, and someone playing on a little piece of a metal roof that fell off the roof, and they were playing like the drums or something with a couple sticks. And I looked around, and every single person that I could see almost was smiling. And I thought to myself, my first thought was, holy, I haven't smiled like that in a long time. Here I am living this I'm on this luxurious bucket list, once in a lifetime fishing trip,
Yep.
catching some of the greatest fish in the ocean that the world has to offer,
Yep.
eating sushi for lunch every day, like the craziest trip you've ever seen in your life.
Yep.
And people half a mile down the road, and I'm depressed and I feel like crap all the time.
Yep.
And I'm looking at now I had my own issues that I had to deal with for sure that were making me that way.
Yep.
But I'm looking at these Costa Ricans and they're smiling and they're happy and they have almost nothing compared to us. Nothing.
Yep.
When people are happy and have almost nothing and I have everything that I could desire and I'm not happy,
Yep.
that tells me something.
Yep.
And what that tells me is that these material things are not the source of your happiness.
Nice.
It's not. Money is not the source of my happiness, and it won't be for the rest of my life. I realized it that day.
Amazing.
So I stopped chasing it. I really needed to gut check there, and not so much gut check, but mind check, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did a lot of reflecting on that, and this is as simple as I can put it. I had a long conversation with my uncle Wayne that day about attitude
Mm-hmm.
and developing your perspective from that attitude on how you can appreciate things better and understand that a coffee from Costa Rica versus a sushi meal on a boat in the middle of the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
it's your attitude and perspective that allow your mind and body to accept and appreciate what you have versus criticizing what you have.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I feel like the more you get used to luxurious things, the less you appreciate the simple things in life. To that guy or lady or whoever said that comment and whoever else, I'm telling you, I know it's tough to try to grasp this because once you have the experience of it, you would. But just from a wisdom standpoint, from someone who has gone through it on both sides of having and not having money and living a luxurious life and not living a luxurious life, living a simple life,
Yeah.
whatever you choose, just make sure that you have the right attitude towards it, because if once you start to lose that appreciation for what you want or what you need in life, things start to lose their value and you drain it.
Yeah.
And I found that the thing that I appreciate the most that never seemed to to devalue is my connection or my relationships with people.
Nice.
I don't have a large circle of social networking or friends or family or whatever. It's pretty small, I would say, for the average person,
Yep.
but each one is great.
So this is a nice segue then into, we usually on this podcast start with the story when you're young and then get into these hot topics. And we've
Mhm.
kind of flipped it because that's where we went and it's amazing. So now let's go back to your childhood. And I want to know if you were able to be present as a kid. And the main thing about sport is that we want them to be able to have fun. And so you're taking this attitude and perspective in your adult life. Now, what was the attitude and perspective as a kid? Were you able to enjoy hockey just to be able to have fun and be with your friends? Before we continue with part 2 of this episode with Paul Ranger, I'd like to make sure that if anyone is suffering from mental health issues, whether it be depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, or others, you know that you're not alone and you can reach out for help. I've included a few resources on my website, which I will link to this conversation. But the simplest thing that you can do in Canada is to text CONNECT, CONNECT, to the number 686868. Again, that is the word connect to the number 686868. This was a heavy conversation so far, and as Paul mentioned, there is light at the end of the tunnel. You might just need some help in order to see it. As for hazing, when I was talking to Paul, I was focused on respecting his boundaries and didn't mention that I was sorry for what happened to him. I want to acknowledge that this must have been an awful event in his life and not easy to talk about. Therefore, I appreciate him opening up in order to make a difference for future players. After talking to Paul, I reached out to multiple hockey organizations in order to get you, the listener, the proper information to address hazing. I really appreciate the context that helped me from the OMHA, Ontario Minor Hockey Association, for discussing what has happened in the past and what has been implemented in order to address hazing for athletes now. Clearly, trying to offer advice is not very easy, as there are a lot of factors that could be going on. I would hope that it would be as simple as this is right and this is wrong, but as the OMHA has pointed out to me, coaches and parents don't always make it that easy. There was an incident that was very similar to what Paul and I discussed, where athletes that did not want to participate in the initiation, better considered hazing on their team, were ostracized and even bullied by their teammates and even coaching staff for not being team players. This just seems crazy to me. The other case that was shared with me were parents trying to tell the hockey organization that their team initiation was none of their business. The team went ahead with their quote unquote initiation and posted some 50 photos on the internet, which ended up being used as real evidence against them. This led to the team being suspended for a year. The coaching staff knew about it and even dropped in on it. And one other case, one player almost died because of the amount of alcohol he was forced to drink. I believe that things are getting better in regards to hazing, but I don't want us to stop talking about this because we might think it's gone away. Here's some information from the coaching course Respect in Sport that all coaches must pass in order to coach a team. When a bystander steps in, bullying stops in 10 seconds 57% of the time. So therefore, at the very least, if you're a coach or a parent, have a conversation with your child or athlete about standing up for others. If you are an athlete listening, know that your voice matters and you can make a difference. Quote, hazing is not team bonding. It's a toxic cycle of dominance and personal torment, and it can be criminal. Your responsibility as a leader is to set a zero tolerance standard for this form of maltreatment. Fortunately, there are many positive and fun teaming building ideas that leaders can use to truly bond participants. Team dinners, movie nights, obstacle courses, camping trips, and even karaoke are just a few examples. Any of these can pull a group of young people together in ways that they'll remember for all the right reasons. End quote. If you're an athlete, I know this doesn't give you a definitive answer as to what to do if you're ever in an uncomfortable situation. Talk to your coaches and your parents so that you have the tools and the support to make sure if you stand up for yourself or others, you'll be okay. We never know what kind of event will have a lifelong effect on a kid. Your impact, whether you're a coach, parent, or even an athlete, has the ability to make amazing effects. It's just a matter of choosing what kind of environment you create. This wraps up part 1 of episode 10 with Paul Ranger. Up next, part 2, Paul's younger years, his advice for youth athletes, coaches, and parents, and how to help create the best environment for young kids today.